But speaking of money and wasting it on people, places, and things that provide no benefit to those funding it, it is time once again to open the books, an exercise that might make your blood and eggnog boil, but a necessary one nonetheless. Joining me now is the man behind those open books, CEO and founder, a public servant to us all, Adam Andrzejewski. Adam, it's great to see you. As always, I know that you're going to tell us about all the things we are wasting our money on this year and years to come, I'm sure. So I want to start out with, as I just discussed, the unaccompanied minors, the illegal immigrants that are streaming across our southern border. How much is that running up our tab?
Well, it hasn't gotten enough attention, Tommy, and thanks for covering it. Since 2012, the United States taxpayer has put $13 billion into the unaccompanied minor program, and the costs on this program are spiking. It's the unintended consequences of an open border. So for last year, in 2022, that's the latest year for full statistics, there was an incredible 150,000 unaccompanied minors. These are children under 18 years of age that come across the border without a parent or without a guardian. And the cost to taxpayers in 22 was nearly $3 billion to take care of these kids. And that was up $1 billion year over year.
I can't imagine what it's going to be looking like for this calendar year, given the fact that we've got thousands coming over in each individual sector per day, if not more than that. And a lot of these are those unaccompanied minors. But even if they're not unaccompanied minors, even if they're families or they're single adult males, it really doesn't matter because as far as I know, I'm pretty sure we're footing the bill for all of that. Their medical expenses, their food, their shelter. They go to the sanctuary cities. They get 4-star hotels in New York City. What is this? Can you predict what this is going to cost us in the next year, just based on the current numbers that are currently coming across our border, if you had to just make an estimate?
So the costs are peaking. I would imagine another $1 billion just for the unaccompanied children will be added to that budget, about $4 billion. And look, it's a human health catastrophe for these children. Look, we need to know who's here, where they're at, and when they're going home. Tommy, we're even losing the location of the adults. A report just broke, it wasn't us, it was somebody else, that 200,000 adults, we don't know where they're at in the system because they didn't put honest addresses or any addresses on their official paperwork. We do know that we have lost track of 85,000 children in the system. This is a system where the kids are being recruited out of South America. They're being smuggled across the border by the cartels. They then go into the U.S. Office of Refugee Resettlement. They're supposed to be then given to a vetted sponsor. The sponsors aren't vetted. They don't return phone calls when the checkups happen. And there's been 85,000 children lost within the system. It's a human trafficking operation.
Yeah, it's a human trafficking operation. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a disaster for the American people and legal immigrants who cared enough about this country to do it the right way. I know that this is a little off topic, and I know that you might not have the exact numbers of this, but we know that these individuals, as you mentioned, a lot of them get the notice to appear and they don't appear. Then they live in the United States. Then they have children in the United States. We fund that. But the constant argument we hear from a certain side of the political aisle is that these people are contributing. They are paying their taxes. Just in the work that you've done on this, is it safe and fair to say that these people are making up for their costs by way of working and contributing through their taxes?
Look, the whole system's broken if you don't have a defended border. The whole system's broken and you can't track anything that you want me to weigh in on if you don't know who, where people are in the country. So first off, you've got to establish a system of rules that are followed whereby you can actually bring people into the country. We're all in favor of legal immigration. Our national debt's going north of 34 trillion. We need hardworking American citizens in this country and a lot more of them to spread the national debt.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, speaking of other areas and places that we're wasting money on, I want to turn now to our elite universities. They've been in the headlines a lot in the last couple of weeks for their failure to condemn anti-Semitism and the genocide of Jews. We saw the UPenn president, of course, resigning due to that. A couple others have yet to be pushed out. But I saw an interesting Open the Books report on this, that although the American taxpayer might just be infuriated of the optics of all of this and the blatant anti-Semitism, things that just make us feel bad, we're also paying for these elite universities that are churning out this kind of product. How much money are we spending, and how are we spending money? A lot of people probably are unaware that the American taxpayer is footing a bill for any of these elite universities.
Yeah, these elite universities like the Ivy League, like Harvard, Stanford, Northwestern, they get more money from taxpayers than what they collect on undergraduate student tuition. And that's been our research at openthebooks.com since 2017. And when Republicans slapped the first ever excessive endowment tax on these wealthy elite universities in 2017, in the American Jobs Act and Tax Cuts Act signed by Trump, everybody else got a tax cut, but a tax hike was slapped on those universities. At the Boston Globe, they cited our work as an impetus for that tax. And now U.S. Senator J.D. Vance has submitted legislation in Congress to up the tax from 1.4% on their investment gains to 35%. Wealthy Americans, Tommy, pay 23.5% capital gains tax rates at the highest level. And there's a lot of capital gains to be paid. Just in the past 5 years, the Ivy League plus Stanford and Northwestern, their endowment has increased by $65 billion.
Wow. And then to see the product that they're churning out is stomach churning, really. We're spending money on these universities. So really, the American taxpayer does have a stake in these decisions, even if you don't go to Harvard, even if you don't have a child that goes to Harvard or any of these elite universities. This is something that we are actively paying into. So we should have a little bit more public pressure and a say in it if we're spending this kind of money. I want to move on now to another area. When I have you, I talk about all the things we're wasting money on. Let's turn now, and we've had this discussion many times, let's turn now to the Middle East, because that's the other big topic of discussion, whether it's our elite universities kind of coddling and shielding Hamas, or it's us just sending money over to directly fund terrorists. Tell me what Open the Books has discovered as far as our funding and our propping up of people and places that, quite frankly, hate us and want to wipe us and Israel off the map.
Donald Trump, he stopped Palestinian aid, froze it for the first time in 71 years of that subsidy. Biden restarted it, and in his first 3 years has put $1 billion into Palestinian aid, and much of that was siphoned off by terrorist organizations for their pet projects. Look, everybody wanted to know how much U.S. foreign aid we had put into Israel. And during the Biden years, the first 3 years, it's been a little less than $7 billion. And that's been dwarfed by our aid to the Middle East, a total of $21 billion. So for every dollar that flowed into Israel, and all of it was for their defense, and now we know how important that was, $2 went to the other 17 countries in the Middle East. Jordan received about $4 billion, and large chunks of that, billions of dollars, were on cash payments. We have, in Saudi Arabia, U.S. taxpayers actually funded a $340,000 public relations campaign to try to convince wealthy Saudis not to have cheetahs as pets.
Wow. Well, I'm sure glad that we can contribute to that important effort there. I think maybe Carol Baskin and Tiger King could have probably done that for a lot cheaper, but that's just me, thinking ahead of the game here. Now, I want to ask you about this Middle East funding. You say we're sending all this money over to the Middle East, to these 17 countries. What is the guise for that money? What do our leaders say that money is for? I'm sure a lot of it turns into terrorism or sponsorship of terrorism in one way or another, but what is it billed as?
Well, you'll talk to the State Department. They say that it's in our strategic national best interest to fund this area of the world. We need friends, we need allies, and that's basically what the money is for our strategic interest. Look, all of that aid is dwarfed by the Biden policy aid on the look the other way on oil sanctions for Iran. It's been a bull market for the mullahs in Iran because Biden won't enforce the hard sanctions on the Iranian sale of oil, say to China. Biden wanted détente with China, with Iran. He got a twofer when he looks the other way and allows Iran to sell their cheap oil to China, and it has enriched the mullahs to the tune of about $50 billion.
And meanwhile, Americans that work in fossil fuels or in coal country, they're essentially being put out of work because of climate change. And meanwhile, we're giving sweetheart deals to nations that hate us, want to kill us, and wish that we were wiped completely and entirely off the map. I'm glad that we're putting in our good humanitarian effort to make these people like us. I'm not so sure there are enough billions in the world to make these people like us, but I'm sure glad that the Biden administration has given it a whack, given it a go. The next thing I want to talk about is another third world country, and that is California. So I was so happy to see, and when we have the clip, I want to play it, but I believe that Governor Ron DeSantis actually used a little bit of content provided by Open the Books to provide us with what I think was debate gold a few weeks ago when he debated Governor Gavin Newsom. Let's take a look at this and talk about it after.
Well, I'm looking at total time. Governor DeSantis, about 2 minutes.
This is a map of San Francisco. There's a lot of plots on that. You may be asking, what is that plotting? Well, this is an app where they plot the human feces that are found on the streets of San Francisco. And you see how almost the whole thing is covered, because that is what has happened in one of the previous greatest cities this country's ever had. Human feces is now a fact of life, except when a communist dictator comes to town. Then they cleaned up the streets. They lined the streets with Chinese flags.
From fiscal and financial waste to actual human waste, tell me about that poop map and what you can tell us about maybe how much money we're spending on waste of all sorts and types.
So that was 2019. We created that map. It trended on national Twitter. We got a lot of news headlines. We were really proud of that. We reframed, using one picture, the human health catastrophe of the homeless crisis in San Francisco. I was really proud that our work made that debate. And many people, like you said, thought it was the key moment. Well, as soon as that went up, of course, we stayed up all night. We downloaded the fresh data over the course of the past 3.5 years in San Francisco. We created a new map. And Tomi, breaking right here on your program, it's worse than ever. So that map DeSantis held up had 130,000 cases of human waste in the public way. The new map has 270,000 cases. And last year was a peak year, almost 36,000 cases of human waste on city streets in 1 year.
In 1 year, human waste. As Governor DeSantis said, one of the greatest cities in the United States, completely overrun by actual crap, thanks to crap leaders. And they actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe San Francisco also has a poop task force that's supposed to go and clean this up when a Chinese dictator comes to town, of course, but also they've had to, enforce a squad of people to clean up this poop because it's not sanitary and it can make people sick. That's got to be a pretty pricey tag for the constituents of San Francisco as well, I'm sure.
Well, they call it the Poop Patrol, and they make a lot of money. And they might be the only public servant in San Francisco that is earning their money. They make up to $185,000 a year.
I mean, that's a small price tag for someone to go and clean up the waste of tweakers and homeless people. I think they're underpaid, to be honest with you. But, when going back to that debate, there's a lot of numbers that were thrown around in that debate. And I imagine as someone like yourself listening to that and watching Gavin Newsom try to protest the very real graphics and data that were provided by Sean Hannity and the team at Fox News, what was your initial thought when you saw him trying to contradict the facts that were on the table? And what were you thinking that you would respond if you were in the place of a Governor Ron DeSantis?
Well, it was obvious that DeSantis, he had the facts and figures. And when you do, you argue them. On the other side of the table with Newsom, he was in a tough spot. I mean, how do you argue against what the Democrats would refer to as data science? As a Democrat, you're supposed to be in favor of data science. So Newsom was in a tough spot. He just tried to smile his way out of these things, and it doesn't work on the national stage. When DeSantis held up the map of San Francisco, look, a picture, Tomi, it tells 1,000 words. There was just no escape. At the end of that, it was just Governor Poop.
Yeah, Governor Poop is exactly right, and that is what we will heretofore refer to Governor Newsom as: greasy Poop Governor. Coming up in the brand new year, what is Open the Books going to be focusing on? I know you guys do so much. You have so many investigations. You're sleuthing through everything to see the waste that our government is putting on the American taxpayer. But come this new year, what are you guys going to be focusing on the most?
Well, I think the first week, Dr. Tony Fauci is in front of Congress to testify. And we're subject matter experts on the Fauci family finances. And so, Tommy, we'll be ready, and I would like to come back on your program to discuss our findings in real time as Dr. Fauci testifies.
Oh, I cannot wait for that. Please do. My show is your platform anytime, especially to expose that little tiny tyrant. So many tyrants to discuss that are wasting our money. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do at Open the Books. You guys are an excellent resource, poop maps and all, and we certainly appreciate it. A very happy holiday to you and a happy new year. And I can't wait for that subject matter to come up in the new year regarding Fauci. Please do come back.
Thank you, Tommy.